What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Talking to the Dog Benfica podcast, episode number 192. And after a week's absence, and I apologize for being absent last week, we had to travel for some personal and business related activities. We're back here, and we're back to give you your weekly fix of Benfica talk.
We're back and better than ever, guys.
Cristiano Oliveira is here.
Olá, tudo bem? Beleza. Yo, it's already 192, huh?
192.
That means 200 is coming up. We got to do something special.
Coming up soon. Maybe we could get some coke and some horse to come on a show with us.
Yeah, whatever the boss says. Okay, I wasn't going there, but I was just gonna say hopefully Steve will join us. But hey, you want coke and horse? I'm okay with the horse.
That's the equivalent. Also, on tonight's podcast, fresh from calling Benfica's game this past Monday, Mr. Patrick Kendrick. What's going on, Patrick?
Good evening, guys. Good to see you.
All right. And on today's podcast, I know we'll talk a little bit about the P Ferreira game. It'll be quick because it was such a long time ago. We'll also look back at the Uniao game that happened this past Monday, and we'll talk big derby, big game this weekend. We'll talk about that and a few other things. So,
wait. You mentioned Benfica played P Ferreira recently?
Extended. Let's just talk about the P Ferreira. We did beat them.
I'd rather not.
We did beat him 3-1. Lindelof got the first goal of his career at Benfica as a senior. But Cristiano, playing at P Ferreira in a field that's usually tough for us, pretty good win. 3-1. We were 1-1 at one point, but
yeah, it's never easy to go out there with something the corners. What's it called?
Capital do Móvel.
Wait, which one? Oh, that's Moreirense. Okay, Capital. It's never easy to go to Capital do Móvel to play. Obviously, most of you guys have been listening here to the podcast have known I've been bitching about a result that we've gotten a couple seasons ago that I still haven't let go. So we all know it's tough to go. Yeah, it was an impressive victory. I know Benfica had just lost points to Futebol Clube Porto, as we all know.
Yeah.
We don't want to go over that. But still, it was a good bounce back game. Good job by the lads. Lindelof has been playing well. We'll get a little bit more into that in a little while. But yeah, it was a nice victory for Benfica. Nice bounce back victory.
Yeah, it was a poor performance in the first half, but then at the end of the game, we found out from Rui Vitoria that five or six players had played with the fever. Apparently, there was a cold going around the locker room, and a lot of these guys were playing with fever symptoms. But still, they pushed through, and they beat P Ferreira in a field that's very tough for Benfica. So 3 points in the bag. I know that Patrick was out of the country that weekend. Probably didn't get a chance to watch that game.
Good thing for him.
Well, yeah, nonetheless, very good victory for Benfica. But let's turn our attention now to the Uniao game, which happened this past Monday. The game was supposed to happen on Sunday, and apparently because of very strong winds in the Madeira Island, a plane that was supposed to bring the Uniao players to the continent didn't travel to Madeira. Couldn't land in Madeira, so the Uniao players couldn't travel to
couldn't land in Madeira. They couldn't take off from Madeira in order to land in Lisboa.
I thought it was the other way. The plane that was.
Why would the other way around bother? I mean, they're trying to leave Madeira to go to land in Lisbon. Who cares what's going on in Madeira as long as they get out?
But I thought it was the plane that was going there for them that didn't land. They only have a limited amount of players. That's what I think.
Oh, now it makes. I see what you're saying. A turnaround flight. I got you.
Yeah. So either or, but the big thing here, and this has kind of been talked about, is the fact that Benfica was supposed to get an extra day of rest because they were playing Sunday and then Sporting was playing Monday, but they didn't. But regardless, I think that's neither here nor there. We had to play the game. We played it. I'll give you the lineup real quick because. Júlio César, Lindelof, Jardel, Semedo, and Grimaldo across the back. Samaris and Talisca in the middle. Pizzi, Gaitan on the wing. Jonas and Mitroglou. Semedo obviously stepped in for André Almeida, who was in risk of seeing his 5th yellow card or whatever. Man, he was short of 1 yellow card to be suspended sitting out. So Vitoria saved him. from playing against Uniao da Madeira so he could play against Sporting. Eliseu did pick up his last yellow card before his suspension against P Ferreira, so Grimaldo was in the back, and also Renato Sanches, who was also in the same situation as Andre Almeida, was also saved, and Talisca played in the middle. Patrick, I know that you were a little bit hesitant to give your review on Grimaldo. I know that you called the game. What did you think of Grimaldo this past Monday?
I think he did quite well in the main. Defensively in the first half, there were a couple of shaky moments, I think, but that comes with being a fullback and playing for Benfica and playing at the Estádio da Luz, because you are expected to push on very high. And as many people know, typically the way the system works is the fullbacks push almost into the opposition half as the default starting position, and then whoever plays defensive midfield, be it Ferreira or Samaris, drops in and sort of becomes three centre-backs as they push the ball out. So that meant that Benfica was slightly vulnerable from these diagonal balls from Uniao da Madeira, and they were nearly caught out on a couple of occasions. Hamilton and Tony Silva, the part of the front three for Uniao. But apart from that, I thought Grimaldo did very well. He was positive going forward. He showed enough intelligence in his covering runs to get back when he was slightly out of position. A couple of nice crosses as well from the left. No, I was impressed. There's definitely potential there. He's at a very good age as well. You can see why Benfica have signed him. And I think if he can push on now, there's no reason why. I still expect to see Eliseu restored to the starting lineup for the Sporting game. And I expect him to be first choice between now and the end of the season. But I think come the summer, he may well leave. But either way, I think it'll be up for grabs. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Spaniard starting at left back next season. But he impressed me more than the very little that we'd seen from him previously, which was 28 minutes in the Taça League against Moreirense, when Benfica were already several goals up. So I was slightly reticent because lots of people were very keen to see Grimaldo play, but given that he'd signed in January, I think it was 11 games in which he wasn't even involved at all. 3 which he didn't come on as a sub, and 8 games where he didn't even make the squad. So you started to wonder whether that was fitness related or whether he wasn't adapting as quickly as anticipated. But Rui Vitoria said after the game that he felt he deserved a start, and I think it's easy to throw someone in when you're forced to. That said, he could have gone with Silvio, who went with Grimaldo, and I think we have a clearer indication now of what the hierarchy is. But I thought he did well.
Yeah, and Cristiano, it looks like Eliseu's contract is up for renewal, and it doesn't look like Benfica is moving too fast to re-sign Eliseu. Obviously, they have some faith in this kid Grimaldo.
Yeah, I mean, there's also reports of Benfica being interested in an 18-year-old left back from
Paraguay,
somewhere in South America. I mean, I think they're just having one of those wait-and-see approaches with Eliseu. I know they know what they have in Eliseu, and right now they're going to test out Grimaldo at practice and as many game times, as many game minutes they could give him as possible to see what they have, and if the dude has the goods, they'll let Eliseu walk away. If not, they could always come back to him at the end of the year. I don't think it's the wrong approach here.
Yeah, is it safe to say that Eliseu probably has a very high salary?
That, and not just that, he's getting up there in age. So I think if you have a kid, let's just be fair. I think Grimaldo, even though he's not the highest paid player on the team, I think he's right in the middle. You know what I mean? I don't think
Eliseu.
I understand. I'm talking about Grimaldo though. I don't think he's one of the bottom guys getting paid. I think his salary's pretty much up there as well. So I don't think this is a salary thing. I think this has more to do with an age thing. I think if they could get younger at that position, they will.
Right, I agree. Well, the report of the Paraguayan left back hasn't been confirmed, but there seems to be a big buzz around it. Nothing has been made official, I don't believe, with this kid, but there is a big buzz about it. Early goal from Jonas. Patrick always gives a different peace of mind to the team, but I didn't think that Benfica were very dominant in the first half. I think that they played their usual style. Like you said, they could have been caught out a few times. Um, any sign of missing Renato? Is there a considerable difference between? Well, there's a considerable difference between Talisca and Renato, but is there a considerable difference in Benfica's game when Renato's not there?
Yes, the game loses intensity. I'm actually someone who's a fan of Talisca. I think he offers something different. I think he offers something which he's something that Benfica don't necessarily have with other players in the squad. I think Talisca has a range of passing that no other player in the midfield can really match. So I think that and he did move the ball very sharply, picks it up, he instantly looks wide and tries to get it out to either Gaitan or Pizzi, and that is his strength. However, Renato really just brings an intensity that no one else can match. I mean, we've seen it before in the odd games when Benfica have played both Samaris and Feza. The speed at which they build up the play is almost non-existent. It's so slow and turgid. Whereas when Renato's in there, both when they have the ball, but especially when they don't have the ball, you just see him buzzing around. He's bouncing off people. He's able to win it back. Not always with clean tackles. It's often just with strength, shoulder barges, etc. And then as soon as he picks up the ball, you see that he wants to drive forward. He wants to pass the ball forward. He's checking over his shoulder. He wants to drive into positions. And they did miss that. But I think it was a smart decision to rest him, given that he was a booking away. I wouldn't have. I think he'd only picked up 4 yellow cards over so we're talking best part of 15 games now. So he's not a dirty player by any means, but there is enough in his game to suggest that he might well have got cautioned. So I think it was the right decision. And I also think I didn't see the P Ferreira game as you said, but I'm sure there may have been a temptation. What am I saying? I think
to pick up a yellow card and just.
I don't know if I think he may have got booked in that game, but with André Almeida, I don't know if both players got booked in that game, but I imagine under the previous coach that if there was a chance of them definitely getting suspended for Uniao, then that may have been the policy taken by the club, which is not something I particularly see from Rui Vitoria. I might be wrong on that. I didn't see the game, so perhaps that was the game in which both Renato and André Almeida got booked in the first place. But if they were going into that game on a yellow card, then I wouldn't have been surprised to see them sort of almost get a cheap one just to be definitely out of the Uniao game. But don't be surprised to see them both suspended after the Sporting game. I think they'll both play.
Yeah, very rarely do you see a Sporting Benfica game with less than 4 yellow cards apiece. Cristiano, what do you think about?
I like the way Talisca spreads the ball around. I think I've mentioned that once before. I like the fact he plays quick and he's always got his head up and he's trying to spread it out wide. I think it'd be interesting to see a combo of Talisca and Renato in the middle together, because I think Samaris, I don't know, man. He played well at the end of last season. He impressed after I think I called him out every single game in the first half. I said, this guy's not a professional player. And then he shut me up and he showed that he could play. But this season, it looks like he's lost once again.
Yeah.
You could tell Benfica's a different team with him in there rather than Feza. So I think it'd be an interesting combo with Renato and Talisca in the middle. I'm not sure I want to play Renato at 6, but again, I think it'd be interesting because I think both of those guys could move the ball. I think they're both quick on the ball. I think it would offer a different dynamic attacking at least. So I think it's definitely something to keep in mind, something to look forward to in the future.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point about that duo. But the thing about Samaris, after he lost the spot to Feza, he was I think he was back in for one game, and he really looked like he had improved. His release timing was faster. He was moving the ball a lot faster. But then, ever since Feza got hurt, he just has declined. For me, he really hasn't been that great. He hasn't impressed me at all, Samaris. And it's almost like, we went from the beginning of the season doubting on who's going to be better being paired up with Renato. to right now everybody's clamoring and asking for Faces to come back, because it seems that that's when Benfica is playing best, is when Faces is there. So I don't know. Patrick, what do you think? You have seen obviously this decline in the Greek, right?
Yeah, I wasn't overly impressed with Samaris yesterday. It is tricky though, because it's very hard to gauge Benfica's performance levels yesterday. Very hard to draw too many conclusions from yesterday's game, because I think Benfica did a very good job. That goal within 5 minutes was the best thing that could have happened, really, in terms of just securing the result. You had a big psychological factor at play, which was that, all right, Benfica should have played a day earlier. So that would have given them more rest. But I think the crucial thing was, once again, they were able to play before Sporting and put the pressure on them and go level on points with them, having slipped up against Porto. And even though it was only a 15-minute difference between kickoff times, Benfica at 7:45 local time and Sporting 8 o'clock local time, scoring within 5 minutes at home, Sporting effectively knew that Benfica were going to win the game. I think the only chance you had of Sporting would have thought is if Benfica had played 70 minutes and got a bit nervy, and as we've seen with some other games this season, the likes of Estoril on the opening game of the season, Moreirense as well, where Benfica toiled a bit. But once they scored within 5 minutes, I think it was very easy for them. They were able to manage the game. There was that one heart in the mouth moment where Julio Cesar came flying out of his goal, but apart from that, there was no real danger. So I think because of that, I think the game was won very early on. Benfica were able to manage their energy levels with 3 or 4 changes to the side, and therefore everyone was playing almost in second gear. However, in recent weeks, I have noticed a bit of a drop-off in Samaris' form. Perhaps that is down to motivation. He knows that with Fazer injured, he doesn't really have to do too much to stay in the side. You'd hope that wouldn't be the case, but perhaps subconsciously, that's what's happened. So, I mean, the Renato and Talisca thing could be an option. I'm not sure it's something I'd necessarily want to see them experimenting with now, unless it were a specific home game. It's the sort of thing that you could try out for a half at home, going into the break with a 1 or 2 goal lead. But I think Talisca is a very good technical footballer. He just needs. I think he's someone who needs regular game time, and once he feels he's a big part of the setup, that's when he can really perform. And he hasn't had that for a while. So it'd be an interesting one, absolutely. But on current form, am I confident about Samaris' form going into the game against Sporting, knowing that their midfield is very strong? No, I'm not, to be honest.
I think Talisca is someone who benefit from a free roll up top rather than someone who has to play the 8 position, have to track back, get the ball, spread it around. Yeah. I think he's got a good enough shot. We've seen it here in his year and a half at Benfica, where he could absolutely put it on goal from the outside of the box. I think he'd benefit from that. Now, it's obviously, you rather play Jonas as a free guy, rather even give it to Gaitan before you're going to give it to Talisca. But I think he'd benefit from that. I'm not sure they're going to do it anytime soon. Like Pat said, maybe with a 2-3 goal lead going into the second half, you might want to do it to test things out. But right now, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, they are winning, even though they haven't beaten anyone. That's good. But they are winning, so keep it as is.
Yeah, there's obviously two points of view. There's people that think that Talisca plays better in a free role behind the forward, and then there's people that think that he's a good setup guy playing in the midfield because of his passing ability, because of his long shot ability. He's not perhaps the most intense guy to play a box-to-box because he's not that very intensive. He's not intensively defensively intense, I should say. He's not that aggressive defensively because that's not his style of play. But there's some people that like him in that role where he could set up, or we could spread the ball, and he could have the outside shot when it's there. So I've yet to see where Talisca is really, where he's going to really come out. But I think that, like Patrick says, if he does get a run of games, there's a possibility that his confidence will grow, and that his control and his form will also increase. I'm of that opinion. But right now, I agree with you, Chris. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And right now, the setup that we have is where we've played the best all season, regardless of not having beaten anyone big yet.
I think that being said, I mean, I think we've played the best when we've had Feja and Renato in the midfield. I think if we get Feja healthy and get this guy back in the starting 11, I think it's only going to benefit us because, like I mentioned before, I don't know what's happened to Samaris. Something's gone off on him. He's not the same player he was last year. Towards the end of last season, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah, he hasn't been the same. Maybe the system, maybe Rui Vitoria's system doesn't suit him as well as JJ's system suited him. I don't know. There's tons of questions, but yeah, he does seem a shadow of his former self this season. So we'll see what happens. But Fesa, we all know what Fesa is going through, and we see it every season. He plays 4 or 5 games, and he's hurt for 10, 15 games. That's Fesa, and I think that when he came to Benfica, I think that Pedro Sorodio was on the pod at that time, and he had a friend that was a Greek football follower, and his first thing he said about Fesa was that he's hurt a lot. He's got issues with staying healthy, and sure enough, that's what we're seeing now. Anyway, anything else you guys wanted to add on this game before we take a short break?
Just wanted to say what a brilliant goal I thought it was from Jonas. Made it look so easy, but the technique required for that, it was just fantastic. Chance out of nothing, poor free kick, only half cleared. The ball's dropping, quick look over the shoulder to make sure he's got enough time and space, and then just nonchalantly struck it perfectly into the corner. If anyone out there listening hasn't seen it yet, go back and watch it and watch all the different angles. There's some great footage of it from BTV. You get about 8 or 9 different angles, and I really enjoyed this little look he took over his shoulder just to make sure that he wasn't going to get hit by someone as the ball drops. And his decision making is fantastic.
And for that position, it's hard to keep it low, and he kept it low. A lot of people would have just killed it over the goal. So
yeah, he got over it.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention, Pat, I'm sorry to cut you off.
That's okay. I'm used to it.
Man, I want to mention Peasy, man. I'm sick and tired of Peasy, bro. I mean, the dude, every one good play he does, he'll come out with 10 bad decision-making plays right afterwards. It seems like he's either trying too hard or he's just messing up. I don't know. I just want to throw it out there because it's aggravating watching him at times.
Yeah, do you think he's feeling Salvio coming in healthy?
I don't know what.
Or you just think that's Pizzi being Pizzi?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I just think it's Peasy being Peasy.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, he's definitely not being the one dominating player that he had been maybe about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. He's being absolutely dominating for us, perhaps one of the best players on the field, and now he's just, I don't know what it is. Something happened. His wife is pregnant. Maybe something's going on. Maybe he's not getting any at home. Who knows?
I mean, I guess.
Anyway, let's take a break here for Nelson's halftime headlines. We'll be right back with the Derby. All right, and we're back. We're back for the second half. Thanks, Nelson, for your halftime headlines. Always a good insight on the Nas Modalidades and all that great stuff. Anyway, let's turn our attention now to the Derby. Comes up this Saturday, 8:45 local at Estádio José Alvalade. Sporting at home has not lost yet this season. 9 wins, 3 ties. It's the best defense in Sporting against the best attack in Benfica. That's how you set up this match. And also, 1 point away from each other is a chance to Sporting either to push away and make the lead to 5 points with the head-to-head, or Benfica just to go ahead and don't look back after this game. A few questions for you guys. I'll start with you, Patrick. Will Jonas finally show up?
You'd want to say yes, based on what he's shown in the previous games against Sporting. I wouldn't hold my breath. That's me talking as a journalist and a realist. It's very tricky. I'd love to say yes. There's absolutely nothing about his play this season and his form to suggest that he wouldn't be capable of putting in a good performance against Sporting. I mean, it's absolutely astonishing what he's achieved. 26 goals from 24 league games. He scored in the Champions League against Zenit, which is something he hasn't done very often. I think it's only a couple of goals he's got in the Champions League now. So on the basis of that showing, scoring a winner late in a game against Zenit, where I think, if we're all honest, had Benfica drawn 0-0 in that first leg against Zenit, their hopes of going through would have been rather slim, whereas now they have a good lead going to Russia. So I think you can point to that as positive evidence in favour of Jonas and how he might have a point to prove. But the numbers are quite damning, really. He has 3 games already against Sporting this season without scoring, 2 against Porto this season without scoring. There was 1 against Porto last season, again without finding the net. So the numbers are starting to stack up, and now is the time. This is the one game where you all would be forgiven if you were to say, okay, you've not scored in 5 games against the 2 teams combined. I think 5, if not 6. Now is the time. If he were to go out there and score 2 and Benfica won 2-0 to leapfrog Sporting, I think everyone would forget very quickly what's gone on before. But otherwise, you're in danger of potentially Jonas scoring 30 plus goals a season, if not 35, if he keeps going at the current rate. Benfica not winning the league, and people starting to say, well, it's all very well scoring 2 against Uniao da Madeira. That was the 9th time, by the way, he'd scored 2 goals in a league game this season at the weekend.
Yeah.
And I think this fans will start to ask the question. I know that it's already become a bit of a story, and so it's now a case of he has to try and end this as soon as possible before it becomes a psychological block for him. I don't think it will be at that level for him. I think it's more coincidental than anything else. These are tight games. I'm sure if you were to look across the stats of other players, there's going to be very few players that go out there and score every time in one of these big games, because they're often settled by 1 goal, or it might be, I know that Abubakar, until he played in the previous game against Benfica, he'd never scored against them, as far as I'm aware. So it's not just restricted to Jonas, but for a player of his importance to Benfica, he has to score in one of these games sooner or later. I don't think him scoring is key to the victory, but so much of Benfica's play goes through him. So at least you want to see him at the heart of the action, dictating things, coming short for the ball, letting players run off him, getting the best out of Mitroglou, and vice versa.
Yeah, and Cristiano, law of average, sooner or later he's got to show up.
Yeah, I mean, I said that the previous game against Football Club de Porto, he hasn't been a big game player, but I think this all falls on Rui Vitoria. I think the most pressure coming into this game falls on Rui Vitoria, and then obviously I think it's Jonas, a guy who scored 26 goals in 24 games, a guy who's fighting for the Pichichi in Europe, the Golden Boot. I think he has to show up at some point. I think he understands that. I think he's going to go into this game knowing that if he doesn't come up in these big games, it's irrelevant how many goals he scores throughout the regular season. I think he knows that. I think the coaching staff knows that, and I think they have to give him a free role. Can't put him up top where he's stuck between 2 central defenders where guys could be able to man mark him. Let the guy roam around, be free, come get the ball and do as he pleases, because that's what we need this weekend.
Yeah, and Cristiano, talking about another guy who wasn't really seen against Porto, Gaitan, in the past couple of weeks, he really hasn't been that stellar, dominating playmaker for us. The guy that makes the difference. What do you make of guy? There's another guy that needs to show up this game. Cristiano.
Oh, you talking to me? Yeah. I mean, it seems like ever since he came back, he picked up that injury in those 2 in between games against Moreirense, and he's came back. He scored a phenomenal goal, then he was out. Then he came back, and he has not been the same player. I don't know if it's just game rhythm or there's something tactically, but he has not been the same player. And if Benfica is going to beat Sporting, who say what you want about Jorge Jesus, the guy has a spectacular record at home every single season. If you're going to go into Alvalade and beat Sporting at home, he has to be back to his old self. We have to see the magic from Nico, because he's sure as hell not been the same player of late.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've noticed that missing from him too, Patrick. So it's a guy that's definitely a determining factor in games like this if Benfica wants to win this league. These are the guys that get paid a lot of money to make the difference, and right now I think Gaitan is kind of slipping a little bit.
Yeah, he's been very off color in the last couple of matches that I've seen. I don't know. It almost looks like he's disinterested, which is quite a damning indictment on Gaitan. So I'm not necessarily going to suggest that is the case, but certainly from some of his performances, it looks like he's not overly bothered. But I'm sure that's not the case. I think it may just be, as Chris said, trying to really get back to full fitness. He has struggled a bit with injuries this season. But we're so used to seeing him pick up the ball and just make things happen, and that hasn't been the case recently. So those two players have to. I mean, you need a performance from all 11 when you're talking about a derby, when you're talking about the meeting of the top two. Julio Cesar will be massive. I have no concerns about him at all. Although for a split second on Monday night, I thought that he was going to be suspended for the Sporting game. I really thought when Tony Silva came through, there was a good yard between him and Julio Cesar. And Julio Cesar actually had to predict where he was going and commit to the challenge. It wasn't him timing the challenge based on where the strike had already gone. It was him reading his body position, and thankfully he won the ball. It was a great piece of goalkeeping. But just for a moment, I thought that Benfica may have been down to 10 men, and then suddenly you've got Edison playing against Sporting, which is not what you want. But in the same way, Casillas was fantastic for Porto when he came to the Estádio da Luz, and that's something that everyone recognised. When Benfica go to Sporting, when they go to Alvalade, they will need Julio Cesar to have a good game, because there's no doubt the Sporting are going to create chances. The first thing you secure is a clean sheet. If you get a clean sheet and you will emerge from the game, even with a 0-0, you're still only one behind. I think Benfica are better at picking up points from the games they should win than some of the other top two. I mean, you just look at the league table, 1 point behind Sporting, and yet they've lost twice to Porto. They've lost to Sporting. So there they've already dropped 9 points on their closest challengers just in those games.
Yeah.
But because they went on that great run, and because they've been pretty good at dispatching the smaller sides in the league, I think the most important thing this weekend is not losing. If you can win the game, so much the better. You go top. It's a big statement psychologically. But even just drawing the game and staying within touching distance could be very crucial, particularly given the run-ins of the various sides. Sporting still have a lot of tough games. Of course, if it is a draw, that opens up the potential of Porto getting that much closer again. Which could make things very interesting indeed, especially if Benfica go on and continue their run in Europe, and of course they're still involved in the Taça da Liga as well. But there's a lot to be excited about. There's a lot to be positive about. I think the two results go hand in hand, really. I think if Benfica lose to Sporting, don't be surprised to see them go out of the Champions League as well. I think if Benfica draw or win at Sporting, they can do enough in St. Petersburg to get through to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, which would be a massive result, because if you look at the other clubs still involved in the competition, you're almost certain of getting a big tie. You're almost certain of getting Real Madrid or Barcelona or Bayern Munich. There's a lot of big teams still left in the competition, or if you're lucky, you get Wolfsburg or Ghent. So it's an exciting week. It's going to be a massive one.
Yeah. But Patrick, do you feel that because Benfica has lost to Porto twice and Sporting once, and really they're right in the thick of it, do you think that losing to Sporting this time around, do you think that be a massive psychological hit for Benfica, being that they know that they've lost big games and they're found a way to somehow still be in the thick of it?
I think it would be just too much to ask from a mathematical perspective. I mean, as things stand, there's 10 games to go. So this is the week 25 game coming up at Alvalade. If Benfica lose, it goes to 4 points, the gap with Sporting, which, as you said, is effectively 5 because of the head-to-head result. So there you're talking about 2 results. You're talking about Benfica having to win 9 and Sporting to drop points in 2 of their last 9. I think it's asking a lot. I don't expect Benfica to win their last 9 in a row. Nor, I think, could you expect Sporting to lose 2 of 9, just looking at the stats and how many they've lost so far this season. I mean, Sporting dropped 7 points the first half of the season only, and then have already dropped 6 in this second half. So it's really been their faltering form which has allowed Benfica back in. The gap was 8 points at one stage. So I think it would be astonishing if Benfica drew the game and then were able to recover that 1 point difference with Sporting, go on and win the league, because I'd love to know if there's ever been a time when a team has won the league without winning any of the 4 matches against their 2 nearest challenges. I'd be surprised if that's happened at all in recent times. I haven't been following the league very long, but maybe someone can shed some light on that. It's interesting. I think they've been given a big opportunity, really. I think in other seasons, one of the other sides would have already been out of sight, because they would have just quite easily seen off mid-table teams, and they would have even seen off the better teams from the other sides, really, the Vitoria de Guimarães and Braga, etc. But it's encouraging they're still there and they have a good opportunity, and now's the time to make a statement. And as I said, at least get a draw, at least stop that rot of losing to Sporting, which is 3 games in a row now, and there's 2 against Porto. It's no wins from 5. It's 5 defeats from 5 games for Rui Vitoria against Porto and Sporting this season, which is not good enough at all.
Pat, I know you don't want to say it, but bro, I'll come out and say it. There's no way in hell Benfica can't come away at least with a point this weekend. They have to, at the very minimum, get a draw in order to stay alive here. I can't count on Football Club Porto going and beating Sport in order for your chances to improve and winning the title. There's no way in hell, as a Benfiquista, that I'll be satisfied with anything but a draw, less than a draw, I should say, at the Alvalade, because reasons I mentioned in previous pods. So Rui Vitoria has to step up and show me that he can win these big games. He has yet to win a big one. I know he beat Atletico Madrid. JC stood on his head. I know you beat a Zenit team. Those are only 2 quality teams Benfica's beaten all season. A Zenit team that hadn't played a game in 2 months. And if that's your defense, if that's your argument, man, that's sad. They have to go out and they have to show the world that they could beat a quality team. And in order for them to stay in a title hunt, they have to at least get me a draw this weekend.
Yeah, let's not forget that Benfica's already played Sporting in Alvalade this year, and they lost to them on penalties. If I'm not, was it on extra time for the Portuguese Cup?
Extra time. It was a late goal in extra time.
So
they're 0-5 this season so far, I believe, against main opposition.
Right, but at the last time at Alvalade and regular time we tied them. So maybe this will be the time. But Chris. Patrick was talking about Julio Cesar and being solid in the back, but the defensive pairing that we got in the center of defense, Lindelof and Jardel. I know that there's hopes that Lisandro may recuperate. We don't know if he's going to be at 100%, if he's going to be at 80%, or if he's going to be at 95%. But what do you think that's going to be a big focal point of this game, the Benfica center backs, especially if Lindelof plays?
I think that if Lisandro's ready to go, you play him this weekend. I know Lindelof has been impressive here. He hasn't really messed up. Really, he's been compared to what we expected, at least I should say, compared to what I expected coming in. I think he's been pretty decent. I think he's been pretty good. But that being said, he hasn't really played against no top-notch striker. No one's really put pressure on him. Like Sporting's going to put pressure on Benfica this weekend. I think if Lisandro's healthy, I think I go with him. And Jardel in the back. And to me, that's it. That's the end of the story. Those are the 2 guys I go with.
But Lisandro, at what level of healthness?
If he's not 100%, I won't play him.
If he's 95%.
I've said this about Jonas in the past when we thought he picked up a knock and he was still playing and he wasn't his best. I think if players aren't 100%, and again, this is long in the season. Most of these guys are not 100%, so I shouldn't even say 100%. But if he's not close to 100%, I wouldn't play him. If he's at 80, I will not play him. 95 and up, yeah, absolutely, I would play him.
If he's at a situation where he's a game time decision,
and he warms up and he comes out of warm-ups with no hiccups, yeah, absolutely, I would play him.
Okay, because if you're a game time decision, that means that Maybe he's just borderline to being okay to play.
Yeah,
Not definitely not going to be 100% because you don't become 100% from day to night. It's a game day test. But do you take Lisandro at somebody who just passed the fitness test over Lindelof?
I still would take him because of experience. And this is a big game, man. This is a huge game going on the road. I know Lindelof started a game against Futebol Clube do Porto, a huge game at home. Totally different atmosphere, totally different pressure, totally different, expectations. I think I go with a guy that has experience, a guy who's been there. We know Slimani and those guys are going to try to play mind games and elbow their way into the box, and there's just so much that could go on in this game. I think I go with the guys that have been there before, guys that have experience, and roll the dice and see if this guy can make it through the whole game.
Yeah, Patrick, what do you think? You agree?
I do. I think that's where you have to trust the player, and you have to let the decision really be up to him. And you say to him, listen, your first choice at the moment. You know your first choice. You've been out a bit. Do you feel able to play 90 minutes? I think if you're not able to play 90 minutes, you have to say, I'm sorry, because the last thing you want to do is have to bring on a centre back for someone who's tiring after 70 minutes when the game's in its crucial stages. So for me, it's as close to 100% as possible, as Chris said. But you trust the player. You ask him the question. If it's touch and go, you say, do you think you can give everything? And if he's true to his teammates, true to the club, he'll give you an honest answer. I think the only other thing I'd say about this game is Benfica need to learn their lessons from what went wrong in the reverse fixture, where they were 3-0 down inside 35 minutes and the game was done. You have to go in at least at half time without having conceded. And that's unless Benfica go and score two in the second half. I don't expect them. I expect this game to be settled by one goal. I can see it as either a 0-0 or a 1-0 either side. So I think the longer the game stays at 0-0, the better it is for Benfica. And then if you can nick a goal, great, but don't lose the game. I know some people will look at the league table and say the onus is on Benfica to go and win the game because Sporting are top, and if they can avoid defeat, they'll still be top. But there's still 9 games to go after this. Okay, it won't be in Benfica's hands, but Sporting still have to play Porto again. I think they still play Braga again. So there's enough there to say, keep yourself alive, stay in it, and then just keep chipping away, keep winning these games as you have been doing, and start to whittle down that lead, which was 8 points, and now it's 1. And we've seen so many weekends where Benfica have taken 3 points and Sporting have dropped points that you have to imagine that can still be the case. Between now and the end of the season, you're going to have Salvio getting fitter every time. He looked very rusty again last night. You're going to have Luizão. I don't know how much we're going to see him towards the end of the season. Lisandro will come back. There's going to be players returning all the time. Jonas, you would hope, will continue his form. And the squad looks deeper than we thought it was. Lindelof has shown that. Grimaldo showed that to a certain extent yesterday. Talisca can play his part as well. There's enough in there. There's players to impact the game off the bench. So I think don't lose the game is the one message I would say. That's not me being negative or pessimistic. It's just stay in the title race. Don't go all out for it with one game and blow your chances.
Yeah, Alfredo, let me ask you a question, Alfredo. As a lifelong Benfiquista, let's just say Benfica goes on and loses this game to Sporting at Alvalade, and then somehow Sporting drops points against Porto and Braga, and Benfica squeaks by them, and Benfica wins the title. As a lifelong Benfiquista, man, will you feel like it's a cheapened title, or will you just be as proud as any other title?
No, I think that that'll be very proud. I think that the team went on a very long and consistent run. At one point, we were 8 points down from Sporting. And through our consistency, and I say this all the time here, that consistency usually wins championship. And throughout our run, we've been probably the most consistent team in the championship, winning all the games, which is what 90% of the games are against little teams, beating all these little teams. That's consistency. Now, losing or failing to win a meaningful game against your direct rivals, that's important also. But I think that consistency in the end actually wins championships. And I know that you guys mentioned on the 9 games that are left to go, and I went back and just looked at what each team has to play, and I wrote down crucial games for each team. So for Sporting, they still have to go to Estoril. They still have to go to Bolonense, which is never easy playing Bolonense. Moreirense is not easy. They still have to go to Porto, and they play Braga. The very last game of the season, they go to Braga. For Benfica, travel to Boa Vista. They get Braga at home. They got to go to Rio Ave. They got Guimarães at home, and then they got to travel to Madeira to play Marítimo. And for Porto, they play Braga this weekend. They go to P Ferreira. They host Sporting, and they go to Rio Ave. So I think out of perhaps Porto seems to have an easier task than all three, but I think Benfica has a much easier than Sporting. So we'll just have to see. And I think that the fact that Sporting has lost a lot of points against the smaller clubs gives us a little bit of hope. But I think that if Benfica wins this game, I think the psychological blow for Sporting is going to be tremendous, especially because they've built up this momentum and they've gotten the fans to a point that they're really believing, and now that they at one point they were 6 up on us, and now all of a sudden they're 1 behind, and we're going to leapfrog them by winning the one game that's going to mean the most in the season from Benfica against Sporting. The one game of the 3 games that we play, or the 4 games that we play them. If we win this one game, which is heading into being the most meaningful game of the season, then I think it's going to be a huge blow for Sporting. I don't know if they'll be able to recover.
Yeah, if, could, should have, would have. I mean, it's a huge if. This is a team that, let's not forget, the last time we played them at home, we got spanked by them. We outplayed by them. And again, I want the 3 points. Don't get me wrong, but like I mentioned before, if I get away with the 1 point, if I get away with the draw coming away from the Alvalade, I think I'll be just as pleased with it, because that's a huge upgrade based on what we've seen in prior games.
Absolutely, I agree with you, and especially looking at the games that they still have left, that they got to play Porto, and most likely they go to Porto, they're dropping points there, regardless of how Porto is. I think that Porto still has some pride left in them, and they still think they're in this fight.
They're right there. They're right there, dude. They're still in the hunt.
I think it's going to depend a lot on what they're going to be able to do against Braga this weekend and what happens in the derby. But I think that if Porto loses against Braga and either Benfica or Sporting wins, I think the title is over for Porto, I think. So we'll just
see what happens, because they still have to play Sporting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's still a long season to go, man. You still have 10 games. And again, like you've mentioned, it depends on these 2 huge results coming up this weekend. If Sporting ties, Porto wins, they're right there. They're within, what, 4 points at the time? And they still play Porto. I mean, they still play Sporting. Sporting still plays Braga. It's still a lot of Campeonato to go for those teams. I think Benfica could have and should have won that game a couple of weeks ago at the start of the lose, which would have, automatically put Porto out of the title hunt, which would have, nailed the coffin shut. I think Benfica, dropped the bucket there. I think they should have stepped up. But again, it's still a lot of Campeonato to go. I think Benfica needs to at least, man, come away with a draw here, because of all those other tough games you mentioned before.
Yeah, at the very minimum, you have to come out with a tie. You can't lose 6 points and just completely throw away anything, and then you got the head-to-head to consider. And as Patrick said, 9 games to go. You have to win the rest of the 9 games and hope that Sporting loses 2 games, which they could very well lose. They could lose to Porto and they could lose to Braga. But still, it's still a huge mathematical equation that you got to formulate there in order to make that happen. But hey, like I said, we've been at 8 points and look at where we are now. So you never know.
Also consider that if Benfica do lose and Porto win, Porto would go above Benfica as well because of the head-to-head results. So then you're looking to overhaul 2 teams. I think, look, if I don't want to dwell on him, I know he's not a popular figure for obvious reasons, but if JJ wins this weekend against Benfica and then manages to beat Porto as well, he's gone 4 wins from 4 in the games against Porto and Benfica, and that's a Sporting coach. It's an incredible achievement. He's already won both of the games that he's played so far against them. So you need to stop that from happening. I think if they did that, you could legitimately say Sporting deserved to win the title. So Benfica have to avoid defeat this weekend, stay within touch, and then it just comes down to the home stretch. They know they've played their 2 games against Porto. They know they've played their 2 games against Sporting. They might have only taken 1 point from 12, and yet they will have a great opportunity to take a 3rd straight league title, which in some ways is they're quite fortunate because they could have been out of things. So I think you need to look at the positives and say you've been given a great opportunity here. Don't blow it by losing at Alvalade. Get the draw at least. If you get a win, so much the better. It's a big statement. But stay. I completely agree with Chris. A draw minimum is massive. Otherwise, I think that's essentially the title over. Although we've said that previously in the season when there was an 8-point gap. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah, because at 1 point, all it is a win from us and a tie from Sporting. That's the 1 point right there. So
exactly.
That's how you leapfrog them. But a loss, I think that it'll be completely damaging to our operations, regardless of whether we've stuck all this time and for some miracle of God we're down to 1 point. But it goes down to consistency. So we'll just have to see. Hey, Chris, maybe third time is a charm.
Yeah,
or
listen,
4th time, or 5th time.
I'm hoping that's the case, man. I'm really hoping that's the case because I'm tired of the Lagartos talking crap. But yeah, I can't get too overly confident because based on what I've seen in previous games and what I've seen from Rui Vitoria, I mean, listen, I'd be lying to you if I were to tell you I was confident going into this game.
You're not confident at all? I'm confident because I think that this is going to be it.
I tell you, I'm looking at things a little bit differently here because of the way Sporting have played of late. But then again, that being said, Porto were at the worst stage that I've seen in years, and they still managed to come into our own house and find a way to beat us 2-1 when we were hitting on all cylinders. We were 13 for 13, and Porto was dragging ass coming in, and they found a way to beat us. So I can't really get too overly confident here based on the way Sporting has played. But again, if there's any confidence, that's the only confidence I'm getting from is that they haven't really played the way they played at the beginning of the season.
Yeah. Anything else you guys wanted to add before we sign off? I think we play Zenit. I think that we all know that we need to beat Zenit. It'll be a tough task in Russia. And as Patrick said, the derby might directly influence our psyche going into the Zenit game. But I think that we can still go there and get a favorable result. But I mean,
let's not forget Benfica's only got 1 victory in their history in Russia, I believe, against Sporting Moscow against 1996. So let's not really sit here and get a little bit too overconfident.
Yeah.
2 0-0 draws. A 0-0 draw on Saturday night and a 0-0 draw on Wednesday afternoon.
I'll sign up for that.
There you go. I'll sign it too. Let's do it. Anything else you guys wanted to add?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Patrick, you're at Benfica TV for the rest of the year, or what, man?
I am, yeah. With all things being well, I should be around for the remaining home games. There was a slight doubt because I'm due to be in the US the week building up to the final game of the season. But looking at the schedule, I should be doing what I did this past weekend, so flying back overnight on the Saturday and being in town for the Sunday. So as long as they play the final game on the Sunday, which I believe is tradition, I will be around for every home game between now and the end of the season, short of unforeseen circumstances cropping up. So let's hope that the title race is still alive going to the last game of the season, or if not, already wrapped up, because it would be great to be celebrating again in Marques. From a personal perspective, feel a bit more of a part of it this time.
Cristiano,
what's up? What's up?
At Tencio10 is where you can find Cristiano Oliveira on Twitter. At Patrick Kendrick with 1K. Right, Patrick? Did I get that right?
You got it right. First time ever, I think.
Well, if you're not following Patrick, then I don't know what's wrong with you anyway. At Benfica Podcast, don't forget our friends over at planetbenfica.co.uk. Shout out to Mr. Steve Santos. I hope you'll be back before the end of the season. At least we're hoping. And I think that's about it. Next week we'll be back. We will recap all the Derby. We'll have Derby talk. Hopefully it'll be a happy one. And more Benfica talk. I think that's about it. Thanks everybody for checking us out. Don't forget to interact with us. Check out the website. All that good stuff. Cristiano, nice seeing you as always, my friend.
Same here, guys.
Patrick, always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem. See you, everybody. Bye.
Good night.